The new kid with a famous last Namath school bell echoed across the empty hallways as students poured into St. Helena International Academy, a private school nestled in the heart of Silicon Valley. It was the first Monday of the fall term, and the scent of fresh books, polished wood, and cafeteria cinnamon rolls filled the air. New lockers shined under the fluorescent lights. Teachers greeted students at the doors of their classrooms. But amidst the usual energy and excitement, there was something different in the air that morning. A murmur had already begun to spread. Quiet at first, then louder and louder. "He's joining today," someone whispered near the lockers. "You mean Sundar Pichai's son?" "Seriously." Another voice replied, filled with disbelief that every student in that hallway knew who Sundar Pichai was. He was more than just a tech giant or the CEO of Google. In the eyes of these students, he was untouchable, a billionaire, a symbol of success. And the idea that his own child would be walking the same school halls as them felt surreal. As the murmur grew louder, a sleek black car rolled to a stop in the school parking lot. It wasn't flashy like a sports car. It was a quiet luxury, understated, but unmistakably expensive. From the back seat stepped a boy tall, slim, with soft black hair neatly combed, and a plain backpack slung over his shoulder. His eyes scanned the school without any sign of arrogance. Just calm curiosity. His name was Arjun Pichai. He was just 13 years old. But today he wasn't just the new kid. He was the new kid with a target on his back. He wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans. No designer logos, no expensive watches, but it didn't matter. The moment some students recognized him, whispers turned into stares. Then came the judgments, the assumptions, and the whispers behind cupped hands. Bet he thinks he's better than us. I heard he has his own butler. Rich kids like him always act like they own the place. Arjun didn't notice, or maybe he did, but didn't let it show. He had transferred from an international school in Singapore, and he was used to being the new face in the crowd. His father had tried to prepare him for this transition, but no amount of parental advice could prepare a child for the cruelty of peer judgment, especially in a world where wealth attracted both admiration and resentment. Arjun's first class was English literature. He walked in, nodded politely at the teacher, and quietly took an empty seat in the middle row. But as he opened his notebook, a small group of boys in the back, 3 in total, locked eyes with each other. They were the kind of boys who had been top dogs at the school for years, popular, athletic, and raised in families with generational wealth. Lucas came from oil money. Ethan's father ran a hedge fund, and Mason's mom was a famous Hollywood producer. They were used to being the richest, the most respected, the most envied, but now someone richer had arrived, and that made him a threat. "Hey," Lucas whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Must be hard being the prince of Google. Hope your golden throne fits in our classroom." A few students chuckled. Arjun looked up, gave a faint smile, and returned to his notebook. He didn't engage. He had learned early that reacting only fed the fire. Silence was his shield, but silence didn't protect him for long. During lunch, Arjun sat alone at a corner table under a tree in the courtyard. He took out a simple home-packed meal, roti, sabzi, and a container of yogurt, while other kids stood in line for pizza slices or chicken sandwiches. Arjun quietly ate his food and listened to the birds above. But Lucas, Ethan, and Mason weren't done. They approached his table slowly, like sharks circling prey. "What's that smell?" Mason said, wrinkling his nose. "Is that ... curry? Don't they have chefs at your mansion?" Ethan added. "Could have brought some caviar or something." Arjun looked up. His face didn't show anger, only calmness. "It's just food. I like it," he said simply. Lucas leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Listen, rich boy, this is our school. And here you don't get a special seat just because your daddy runs the internet." Then, in a flash, Lucas knocked Arjun's yogurt off the table, splashing it onto the grass. A few students nearby gasped. Others turned away. No one said anything. Arjun stared at the spilled yogurt for a long second. Then he calmly picked up the container, cleaned it with a napkin, and threw it in the trash. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't challenge them, but inside something began to shift. The next day, the whispers continued, and so did the bullying. In a locker room, Mason slipped Arjun's sneakers into the trash bin. Ethan poured water into his backpack. Lucas started a rumor that Arjun had his own security guard on campus, which wasn't true. He walked to class like everyone else. What hurt more than the bullying, though, was the silence of the other students. The kids who watched it happen, but looked the other way. Arjun wasn't looking for pity. He wasn't looking for anyone to fight his battles. But it made him wonder, why did people only stand up when it was safe? His father had taught him differently. Sundar. Pichai had always told him, kindness doesn't mean weakness. But sometimes silence is the loudest answer. But even those words were starting to feel heavy. On the third day, something unexpected happened. After class, Arjun walked into the music room. It was quiet and empty. Sunlight streamed in through the high windows, casting soft gold on the instruments. He sat down at the old upright piano in the corner, ran his fingers along the keys, and slowly began to play. His fingers danced softly, notes rising and falling like whispers. He closed his eyes and let the melody pour out, unfiltered, raw, and honest. He didn't know someone was listening. Emma. She was sitting behind the curtain near the cello stand, reading a novel. When Arjun started playing, she froze. The music touched something in her. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it was full of soul. When Arjun finished, she stepped out. You play beautifully, she said. Arjun turned, slightly startled. He hadn't seen her. Thank you, he said shyly. I didn't know anyone was here. I like to hide in the music room, Emma replied. Helps me think. They spoke for a while about books, about music, about things that had nothing to do with money, fame, or Google. Emma didn't care who his father was. And Arjun didn't care that she wore thrift clothes and carried a second-hand backpack. For the first time since arriving, he felt seen not as a name or a status, but as a person. But good moments don't last forever. When Lucas saw Arjun laughing with Emma near the lockers later that afternoon, jealousy flickered in his eyes. He had liked Emma for years, but she had never looked at him the way she looked at Arjun in that moment, that night. Lucas sent a message in the group chat. We need to teach Google Boy a lesson. Big one, Ethan replied with a thumbs up emoji. Mason added a fire gif. The trap was set. The next morning, Arjun walked into school and found a folded note in his locker. It was written in pencil, no name on it. Meet us behind the gym at lunch. We need to talk. It's about Emma. His heart skipped. He hesitated. But after a moment, he folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't know he was walking into something cruel. At lunch, while other students laughed and gossiped. In the cafeteria, Arjun walked quietly behind the gym. The concrete path was cracked. Weeds grew between the bricks. The place was deserted. Or so he thought. As he turned the corner, he saw them, Lucas, Ethan, and Mason, standing in a half circle, waiting. Where's Emma? Arjun asked, his voice calm. Lucas grinned. She's not coming. We are. Before Arjun could step back, Ethan grabbed his backpack and yanked it away. Mason shoved him against the wall. What do you want? Arjun said, trying to keep his voice steady. Lucas stepped closer. You think you're better than us? Just because you have money? Just because Emma talks to you now? I never said I was better than anyone, Arjun replied. No, but you act like it, Ethan snapped. Quiet, smart, polite, trying to be perfect. Maybe you're scared, Mason added. Because without your dad's name, you're just another loser. They pushed him again. Not hard, but hard enough to sting. Lucas pulled something out of his pocket. Arjun's student ID card. Found this in your locker this morning, he said. Let's see what happens when it's accidentally shredded in the art room. Arjun stepped forward, his voice low. You can destroy the card, he said, but it won't change who I am, and it won't fix whatever you're angry about. Lucas froze for a moment, Then something unexpected happened. A voice rang out from behind. Them. Put it down. They turned. Emma stood at the corner, arms crossed, eyes fierce. Behind her were two teachers. Lucas dropped the ID card. The world slowed down. And in that moment, Arjun realized sometimes it only takes one person to speak up. And everything changes. Asterisk. Silence is broken. The sound of Emma's voice cut through the heavy tension like a blade, slicing clean through rope. The three boys, Lucas, Ethan, and Mason, froze in place, caught mid-act. The weight of her words, calm but firm, settled over them like fog. Behind her stood Miss Ramirez, the stern-eyed history teacher known for her zero tolerance toward bullying, and Mr. Banks, the kind yet observant physics teacher who rarely missed anything that happened on school grounds. Arjun didn't move. He just stood there, his back still near the wall where he had been cornered moments ago. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the flood of emotions he had kept buried for days. Humiliation, confusion, loneliness, and now relief. Someone had finally spoken up. And not just anyone. Asterisk. Lucas's hand, which gripped Arjun's student eye just seconds ago, twitched slightly before he dropped the plastic card onto the ground. It hit the concrete with a soft clack that somehow echoed louder than any shout could have. Miss Ramirez's voice followed almost immediately, cutting through the silence. Inside, all of you, now. Ethan and Mason looked at Lucas, waiting for him to say something clever, something to get them out of this mess. But for the first time since this all started, Lucas looked unsure. The confidence, the entitlement, the cocky smirk, it was gone. He turned away and walked toward the school doors, and the others followed. Mr. Banks stayed behind with Arjun and Emma as Miss Ramirez escorted the boys. You okay? Mr. Banks asked Arjun softly. Arjun nodded, though his throat felt tight. Yeah, he said after a moment, his voice barely a whisper. Emma stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I saw them follow you. I didn't know what they were planning, but I had a feeling it wasn't good, I told Miss Ramirez. Arjun looked at her, trying to say thank you, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he gave a small nod, one filled with gratitude, respect, and something else. Something that didn't need words. Mr. Banks placed a gentle hand on Arjun's shoulder. You handled yourself with a lot of dignity. That's rare. It wasn't the victory anyone expected. There were no dramatic fights, no revenge plots, just a quiet act of courage, someone choosing not to stay silent. But as Arjun returned to his next class, the atmosphere around him had changed. It wasn't just the students watching him anymore. It was how they watched him. No longer just a Google boy. Now he was the kid who stayed calm under pressure, the one who stood his ground, and the one who didn't let wealth define him or use it as a shield. After school, Sundar Pichai sat quietly in the backyard patio of their home, a tablet resting on the table next to his coffee. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. He was waiting, not anxiously, just with the intent. Ever since Arjun had transferred, Sundar made a point to be home early. He had meetings stacked until noon. But come afternoon, his calendar had a simple recurring note: be present. Listen. The garden gate creaked open. Arjun walked in, slower than usual. His hoodie was slightly wrinkled, and he had a faint red mark on the side of his arm, probably from the wall behind the gym. Sundar noticed everything, but didn't say anything yet. Arjun sat down across from him. For a while, they said nothing. Birds chirped in the distance. A gentle breeze swayed the trees. Sometimes silence wasn't awkward. Sometimes it gave room for truth. Finally, Arjun spoke. They tried to corner me, he said, eyes fixed on the ground. Lucas and the others. Sundar nodded slowly, not interrupting. They've been doing it all week, Arjun continued. But today, Emma stopped them, and the teachers saw. Still, Sundar waited, letting his son release it in his own time. They think I act like I'm better than them, Arjun said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I just don't want to cause trouble. Sundar leaned forward slightly, placing his tablet down. Arjun, he said gently, being kind doesn't mean you have to shrink yourself. And being quiet doesn't mean you should become invisible. Arjun looked up. When I was your age, Sundar continued, I had one pen, one notebook, and sometimes no electricity at night. But I had something more powerful than money. I had clarity. I knew who I was, and I knew who I wanted to be. That helped me ignore the noise. He paused, then added, You know who you are? That's why they're threatened. Because they don't. Arjun took a deep breath. I didn't fight back. He said, You didn't need to. Sundar replied, You already won. The next day at school was different. News traveled fast, especially in a private academy filled with kids who thrived on gossip and status. The story spread, half whispers and half exaggerations. Some said Arjun had fought back with martial arts. Others said his father flew in by helicopter. Neither were true. But the real story that Arjun had stood his ground with calm dignity and had a fellow student step in was somehow even more powerful. Emma and Arjun walked into the music room together during free period. The piano sat quietly in the corner, untouched. You want to play something? She asked, setting her bag down. Arjun nodded and sat at the bench. His fingers moved gently over the keys, this time more freely, more confidently. The music floated through the room like a breeze, soft yet steady. Emma sat beside him on the bench, not speaking. She just listened. When he finished, she looked at him. You know, she said, you don't have to prove anything to anyone here. I know. He replied, but I want to prove something to myself. Meanwhile, in the administrative building, Miss Ramirez sat in a meeting with the school principal, Dr. Thompson, and the parents of Lucas, Ethan, and Mason. The conversation was tense. The boys had been suspended for 3 days, and their parents were furious not at the boys' behavior, but at the consequences. My son has been at this school for 6 years, Lucas's mother snapped. He's never had any issues before this new kid arrived. And you're punishing them because of some misunderstanding? Mason's mother added, You're making this much bigger than it is. Miss Ramirez didn't flinch. Your son's targeted a student repeatedly. They vandalized his belongings. They cornered him behind the gym. We have witnesses. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's bullying. Dr. Thompson, ever diplomatic, added, This school has zero tolerance for harassment. Regardless of the student's background, Lucas's father scoffed. Let me be clear. If this impacts my son's record, there will be consequences. Miss Ramirez leaned forward, her voice calm. There already have been consequences for your son's actions, not for our policy. Outside the office, Arjun walked past the hallway with Emma, unaware of the meeting. He didn't care about punishments or records. He didn't need apologies. He just wanted peace. But life had a strange way of testing you. When you least expected it, by Friday. Lucas and his friends had returned from suspension. And though they avoided Arjun in the hallways, something simmered beneath the surface. Their pride had been wounded. Their social status had taken a hit. And when that happens, some people reflect. Others retaliate. It started subtly. Arjun's locker was moved without notice. His project presentation file accidentally disappeared from the shared drive. Rumors spread that he had only gotten accepted into St. Helena because of his father's donation, which wasn't true. Arjun had passed the entry exams with one of the highest scores in his class. The attacks were quiet now, not loud or obvious. Just enough to chip away at confidence. One afternoon, as he walked into computer science class, he noticed students gathered around, laughing at something on a tablet. Emma rushed toward him, her expression filled with concern. Don't look, she said, but it was too late. Lucas had edited a fake video clip crudely animated, mocking Arjun as a spoiled prince, being carried around school by robots. The background music was a clownish tune, and the captions were cruel. Students were laughing not because it was funny, but because it was easier than standing up. Arjun felt the weight press on his chest. Not from embarrassment, but from disappointment. He left the room quietly, walked to the school rooftop, a place most students didn't visit, and sat alone. The sky stretched wide above him, blue, endless, peaceful, far from the noise below. He sat there for a long time, thinking about everything, the bullies, the rumors, the expectations of being Sundar, Pichai's son. He didn't choose this name. He didn't ask for the spotlight. He just wanted to be himself. He closed his eyes. Then he reached into his backpack, pulled out a small black notebook, and began to write page after page. Not about the bullies, not about the pain, but about who he really was and who he wanted to become. That night at home, Sundar found the notebook on the patio table. Arjun had forgotten it. He opened it and read the first line. I am not my father's shadow. I am his light, but I will shine in my own way. Sundar smiled. Not because he was proud of Arjun's words, but because he was proud of the strength it took to write them. The next Monday, something unexpected happened. Arjun walked into the auditorium during morning assembly and saw a poster on the wall. Student-led leadership summit, open mic theme. Your voice matters. The student council president, Maya, had started the event a year ago to help students express themselves. It had never been very popular. Only a handful of students usually signed up. But that day, Arjun's name was on the list. Emma saw it and looked at him in surprise. You're speaking? Arjun nodded. Double quotes. I think it's time. As the crowd gathered in the auditorium, whispers returned. Students were curious. What would the son of Sundar Pichai say? Would he talk about tech, money, success? As Arjun walked up to the stage, the room fell silent. He looked around. Then he spoke. Slow, clear, and honest. When I arrived here, I wasn't sure who I could trust. Not because of who I was, but because of what people assumed about me. Some thought I came here to show off. Others thought I was just another rich kid, but the truth is, I came here to find something I didn't even know I was missing. And I found it in silence, in pain, in music, in friendship, and in kindness. What defines us is not what people say behind our backs. It's how we walk forward even when they try to hold us down. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to look beyond the label. He paused, asterisk. Ben ended with, everyone here has a story. Maybe it's time we started listening to each other instead of judging so quickly. The auditorium stayed quiet for a second. Then someone clapped. Then another. And another, until the entire room stood in applause. But as the lights dimmed and students filed out of the auditorium, Lucas stood in the back, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and deep down, a new plan began to form. Asterisk. When silence turns into a storm, the energy in the school shifted. After Arjun's speech, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. A subtle current ran through the halls of St. Helena Academy, like the air before a storm. Some students who had once ignored Arjun now offered him silent nods of respect. A few even walked up to him after class and quietly said, "That was brave," or "You said what most of us feel." Emma was proud. She walked beside him that week with her chin a little higher. Not because she was suddenly friends with the most talked about student in school, but because she knew something others didn't. Arjun hadn't made that speech to impress anyone. He made it to release the weight he had been carrying alone. But the applause faded. And as the week went on, the shadows returned. Lucas couldn't forget the look on everyone's faces during Arjun's speech. Admiration, respect, some even envy. Emotions that had once belonged to him. In a place like St. Helena, where reputation was currency, Lucas had built his identity on being the center of attention. But now, Arjun had stolen that spotlight and done it without trying. And for Lucas, that was unforgivable. He called Ethan and Mason to his house that Friday night. They sat in his father's office, a dimly lit room with leather chairs, bookshelves filled with expensive hardcovers no one read, and the faint smell of scotch soaked into the furniture. "We need to end this," Lucas said. Coldly. Ethan leaned. back, nervously flipping a coin between his fingers. You mean what? Fight him? Already got suspended once. Lucas shook his head, not with fists. That won't work. We're going to make everyone see the truth about him. Mason frowned. What truth? Lucas smiled sharp and venomous. That he's not as perfect as he pretends to be. He opened his laptop and pulled up a folder. We're going digital. Over the next few days, Arjun began noticing strange things. A few classmates who had been warm after his speech now avoided his eyes. When he walked into the library, 2 students quickly closed a laptop and whispered as he passed. In the cafeteria, someone left a note on his table that simply read, "You're not who you pretend to be." Emma saw the shift too. She tried to ignore it at first, but then came the group text in the student Discord channel. Anonymous. Cruel. It read, "What happens when a rich kid lies his way into school? Is this still St. Elena or a playground for nepotism?" Attached was a link. Emma clicked it. Her stomach dropped. It was a blog crudely designed, hidden behind a fake domain, but filled with screenshots, quotes, and images stitched together. To paint a very ugly picture, it accused Arjun of getting into the school through donations, bribery, and manipulation. It suggested his father used influence to push other applicants out. It hinted that Arjun was secretly recording other students for Google's data collection. Absurd things. Laughable even. But presented with just enough twisted proof that someone who didn't know better might start to believe it. Emma slammed her laptop shut and ran to find Arjun. He was in the art studio, painting quietly. It was his way of unwinding brushing, soft colors across canvas, losing himself in the movement of it. "Arjun," she said, breathless, "you need to see this." He followed her back to the library's corner computer dot. He read the post dot, every word dot slowly, dot his eyes didn't blink dot his. Hands stayed still, and when he was done, he turned to her and said, "They planned this." "We have to tell someone," Emma said. "The principal." "The teachers. Your dad." Arjun shook his head. "Not yet." Emma's brows furrowed. "Why not?" "Because if I react now, it will look like I'm panicking. Like I'm hiding something. We need to find out who made it. We already know who made it. But we need proof." Sundar Pichai noticed his son was quieter than usual that weekend. Not withdrawn, just distant. During dinner, Arjun picked at his food. He smiled when spoken to, but didn't initiate conversation. And he spent more time outside in the garden, sitting under the mango tree in the corner, where the light barely reached on Sunday evening. Sundar walked out with 2 cups of warm chai and sat beside him. "You don't have to tell me," Sundar said, "but if you do, I'll listen." Arjun took the cup. He stared at the steam for a while, then, softly. He said, "They made a website about me." Sundar didn't flinch. "It says I cheated to get into school. That you paid someone. That I spy on students for you." Sundar nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" Arjun thought for a long moment. "Like, no matter what I do, they'll twist. And if I say anything, they'll just say I'm using you to clean it up." Sundar set his chai down. "Then you don't fight the lies with noise," he said. "You fight them with light." Arjun looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Sundar smiled gently. "We build things at Google. But before we build, we debug. We find the broken code and replace it with truth. Not with anger. Not with revenge. With precision. With clarity. With grace. So, what do? You don't chase the lies. You make the truth louder." On Monday morning, Arjun walked into school like usual. Students were whispering, snickering. The post had gone viral within the school's bubble. Even some teachers had heard about it, though none addressed it directly. Lucas watched him from across the hallway, a smirk hidden behind his locker door. He thought he had 1 dot, but Arjun was already working on something. That night, he emailed Mr. Banks.subject, student project proposal body. "I'd like to organize a school-wide discussion on digital misinformation, anonymous cyberbullying, and responsible tech ethics. Would you be willing to mentor me on this?" The reply came fast. "I'd be honored. Let's talk tomorrow." For the next 4 days, Arjun worked. With Emma's help, and eventually Maya from student council, they built a presentation. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't an accusation. It was education. They collected data on how fake narratives spread. They included examples from global incidents. And yes, without naming himself, Arjun showed how easily a person could be attacked using half-truths and edited screenshots. On Friday, he stood, again, in front of the same auditorium crowd. Same room. Same boy. But this time, his message was sharper. What happens online doesn't stay online. It follows people into classrooms, into their minds, into their sleep. When you click share, without checking, you become part of a lie, and lies ruin lives. He paused. Looked at the crowd. I know someone who was targeted, accused of things that weren't true. I watched how quickly people turned away, afraid of being next. But truth doesn't need an army. It just needs courage. Click to the final slide. It read, choose courage. Check facts. Be human. The room was still. Even the teachers in the back were leaning forward. Emma looked at Lucas. He wasn't smiling anymore, but the next twist didn't come from the students. It came from the world outside. On Monday morning, as Arjun arrived at school, he saw Mr. Thompson, the principal, waiting for him at the entrance. Arjun, he said, can you step into my office for a moment? Arjun followed him silently. Inside the office, the air was tense. A large monitor displayed a news article. Arjun's heart sank. Google CEO's son accused of scandal at elite school. Anonymous post sparks investigation. Someone had leaked a fake blog. And now it was global. Meanwhile, at Google's headquarters, Sundar stood in his office as two of his communication advisors showed him the same article. He read it. He didn't blink. How should we respond? One advisor asked. Sundar turned away from the window. We don't? Sir, this is my son's story, Sundar said. He'll decide how it ends. Back at school, the whispers were louder now. This wasn't just a local rumor. This was a media storm. Paparazzi waited outside school gates. Headlines buzzed on every newsfeed. Some students felt sorry. Some were curious. Some even excited. Fame in any form fascinated them. But Arjun, he didn't panic. He waited. In that afternoon, he walked straight into the computer science lab. He opened a blank web page. Typed. Not to defend. But to tell the truth. Not just his truth, but the truth about kindness, silence, and standing tall. In a world that tried to drag you down, his final sentence read, I am not defined by the noise. I am the signal. Asterisk the boy who wrote the truth. Sun had barely risen when Arjun clicked the publish button. The words he had typed late into the night now existed on a quiet webpage with no ads, no distractions, and no attempt to go viral. It wasn't dressed up with graphics or filters, just white background, black text. Pure honesty. I am not defined by the noise. I am the signal. That line sat at the top, bold and still, like a lighthouse in the fog. He didn't send it to his classmates. Didn't share it with teachers. Didn't even tell Emma right away. He just left it there, untouched. By the time he reached school that morning, something strange had begun. Whispers weren't about the rumors anymore. They were about him, not the blog, not the article, not his last name, but him as a person. Maya from student council pulled them aside. Did you write that? She asked quietly. Arjun didn't lie. Yes. She nodded slowly. It's beautiful and brave. He nodded back, not in pride but peace, because for the first time in weeks, he wasn't carrying the weight of other people's opinions. He had placed it down. And in its place, he had chosen something far heavier but much more powerful than truth. By lunchtime, students across the school had read the blog, not because it was trending, but because someone posted the link in the school forum with the message. This is how you speak when you have nothing to hide. Soon, screenshots appeared on Instagram stories. One student wrote, I judged him. Now I feel ashamed. Another wrote, I wish I had half the courage this kid has. Emma found him sitting in the courtyard under their usual tree. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside him, the way she always did. You're glowing, she said finally with a soft smile. Arjun chuckled. Maybe I'm just exhausted. She pulled something from her bag, a paper printout of the blog. I brought this, she said. I didn't want it to disappear into the internet. You should keep it. He looked at the pages in her hand. The same words he'd typed in silence were now etched on paper. Somehow, they felt more real this way. Like they mattered. Like he mattered. At Google headquarters. The conversation around the leaked article had taken a different tone. Sundar sat in a closed-door meeting with his executive team. Legal departments had already prepared statements. Communications had drafted a neutral response. Public relations wanted to do damage control, but Sundar held up a hand. I read my son's blog, he said. He's already said what needed to be said. A young analyst raised her hand. Sir, with all due respect, your silence might be interpreted as guilt. Sundar smiled gently. Silence isn't always guilt. Sometimes it's trust. He stood up, and I trust him. He paused, then added something no one expected. But that doesn't mean I'll stay quiet forever. Lucas, meanwhile, was unraveling. When the article went viral, he had laughed. When people whispered in the halls, he smirked. But now, the shift was happening too fast. People were siding with Arjun. Teachers were mentioning the blog in class. Even Ethan and Mason were beginning to distance themselves. Maybe we took it too far, Mason said nervously during lunch. Lucas slammed his tray down. Don't get soft now. It's not about being soft, Ethan muttered. He didn't even fight back. And he still won, Lucas glared. This isn't over. But something inside him knew it was. He just wasn't ready to admit it. That Friday, the school held its annual Tech Ethics Assembly, a tradition since the school's founding. This year, the board had invited a special guest. No one knew who. It was. Rumors swirled. Some said it would be a Silicon Valley CEO. Others guessed a famous inventor. When the auditorium lights dimmed and the principal stepped on stage, students leaned forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thompson began. Today, we're honored to welcome someone who has shaped the world of technology with integrity, humility, and wisdom. Please welcome Sundar Pichai. Gasps echoed across the room. Students craned their necks. Phones buzzed. Emma turned to Arjun. Eyes wide, he blinked. Stunned. He didn't know his father was coming. He didn't know no one knew his father was coming. When Sundar walked on stage, he didn't wear a suit. Just a simple blue sweater and khaki pants. No entourage. No security. Just a small device in his hand and a gentle presence that filled the room. He looked at the sea of young faces. Then he began. Years ago, I left my home country with one suitcase, a few dreams, and very little money. I didn't have access to the internet until I was a teenager. But I had curiosity, and I had kindness around me, and that was enough. He paused, but today many young people are growing up in a different world, a noisier world, a faster world, and sometimes a crueler one. He clicked his device. Behind him, a slide appeared. Truth in the digital age. Technology is neutral, he said. But the people who use it are not. Every click, every share, every post, you are making a choice. To build or to break. To amplify or to destroy. To rise or sink. He looked out into the crowd. You may think you're just a student. Just one voice. But your voice can start a fire or put one out. Another pause. And then, this past week, someone at this school was targeted. Lead about, humiliated, and yet he responded with silence, patience, and truth. Not because he's weak, but because he's strong. Some students shifted in their seats. They knew who he meant. I am not here today as the CEO of Google, Sundar continued. I'm here as a father, and I am proud not because my son is perfect, but because he chose to stand with dignity in a moment when many would have chosen rage. He took a breath, and now it's your turn. He clicked again. The next slide read, every student will be given the chance to lead a digital kindness initiative. Choose what kind of internet you want to create. The room erupted in applause. But as the students clapped, something happened backstage. Mr. Banks, who had been monitoring school servers due to the online bullying incident, walked up to Mr. Thompson, holding a tablet. His expression was tight. "Sir," he whispered, "we found something." Later that afternoon, Arjun was called to the principal's office. When he walked in, he saw Miss Ramirez, R. Banks, and Mr. Thompson waiting. On the screen, they showed him server logs, metadata, access history. They had traced the anonymous blog, and the fake rumors. Lucas. It all come from his school-issued laptop. Not once, but over 3 weeks. Everything was documented. Emails. Drafts. Screenshots. Even the attempt to disguise the IP address. The truth had been buried under lies. But now, it was staring back like a spotlight in a dark room. Arjun felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and something like forgiveness. He didn't cheer. He didn't gloat. He just said, "I understand." "Do you want to press charges?" Mr. Thompson asked. Arjun thought for a long moment. Then he replied, "No. Are you sure?" Miss Ramirez asked softly. He nodded. "Because punishment isn't the same as change. If he can learn from this, then maybe this pain will mean something." The room was silent. Then Mr. Banks spoke. "You're a rare kind of leader, Arjun." On Monday morning, Lucas was suspended indefinitely. Students found out quickly. Some were shocked. Others said it was overdue. Ethan and Mason apologized to Arjun privately. Arjun accepted. Not because they deserved it, but because holding on to hate felt heavier than letting go. Weeks passed. The media moved on. The school healed. The courtyard under. The tree became a quiet place again. One afternoon, Arjun sat beside Emma, watching clouds drift across the sky. "Do you think things will ever be normal?" she asked. Arjun smiled. "I hope not." "Why?" "Because normal was silence, and I'd rather live in a world where people speak up." Emma reached into her backpack and handed him a small envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a photo. It was the two of them, him at the piano, her by his side, both laughing. Someone had taken it without them knowing. On the back, she had written, "You don't have to be loud to be heard." He held the photo for a long time. Then he whispered, "Thank you." But just as life was settling down, something unexpected happened. One evening, Arjun got a phone call. A journalist. A well-known one. She said she had been following the story, and she wanted to feature him not just as the CEO's son, but as a voice for digital ethics. "You've started something big," she said. "Whether you like it or not, people are listening." And in that moment, Arjun realized the world wasn't just watching. It was waiting. Asterisk, a voice the world couldn't ignore. Days after the call from the journalist moved like waves, slow at first, then crashing all at once. Arjun had never been interviewed before. He wasn't like his father, who appeared on panels, gave speeches, and smiled under the blinding lights of a dozen cameras. Arjun preferred quiet corners, soft music, conversations with meaning. But when the voice on the other end of the phone said, "We want the world to hear your side," something shifted in him. He realized this wasn't about just his story anymore. It was about every teenager who'd ever been misjudged, every quiet kid misunderstood, every student who suffered silently because they were different. He had carried the shame alone. Now, he could carry the message forward. He agreed to the interview. The article went live 3 days later on a respected global platform. Its title read, "A Quiet Signal: How a 13-year-old Stood Up to Cyberbullying and Taught a Tech-Savvy World." What humanity still means. It wasn't sensational. It didn't mention Google in the headline. And it didn't paint Arjun as a perfect hero. It showed him as real, vulnerable, thoughtful. It described the anonymous smear campaign against him, the way he responded with a blog post instead of blame, and how he rallied a school not by shouting, but by being steady in the storm out there. Were quotes from students, teachers, and even from Emma. Her words were simple. He didn't want to win. He just wanted peace. Within hours, the story exploded. Celebrities retweeted it. Youth organizations reposted it. Mental health advocates highlighted it. The digital world which once tried to bury Arjun in lies, now lifted his truth. At school, the atmosphere was transformed. Not just for Arjun, but for everyone. A culture of fear had cracked, and through the crack, something good began to grow. Students who once mocked others now hesitated. Kids who were always invisible started speaking up. Teachers began holding open dialogues during class about online behavior, digital accountability, and emotional safety. A small group of students even approached Arjun with an idea to create a peer-led tech ethics club. They wanted him to be the founder. He smiled, humbled. Only if Emma co-leads it, he said. Emma rolled her eyes but blushed. Back home, Sundar watched all of this unfold, like a parent watches a young tree finally take root in unpredictable soil. One evening, he called Arjun out to the garden. They sat together near the fire pit, soft yellow flames dancing in the fading light. Sundar began. I used to think success meant solving hard problems, launching products, making big moves. He paused. But watching you, I've realized that sometimes the hardest problem is staying kind when the world isn't, and the biggest move is saying something honest when silence is easier. Arjun listened closely, his eyes reflecting the firelight. You made me proud, Sundar said. Not because you're strong, but because you didn't let the world make you hard. They sat quietly for a while. Then Arjun said, I was scared. Not of what they said, but of becoming like them, bitter, angry. And yet, Sundar smiled, you didn't. Arjun leaned his head against his father's shoulder. For a moment, there were no words. Only warmth. Only peace. But peace never lasts too long. Not when the world begins to notice you. 2 weeks later, Arjun received another call, this time from an international nonprofit based in Geneva. They were organizing the annual Youth Digital Responsibility Summit, where young leaders from around the world spoke about the challenges and ethics of growing up in a digital-first generation. And they wanted Arjun to be the keynote speaker. We believe your voice represents millions, the woman on the phone said. You've lived through the kind of digital harm most people only read about, and you've responded with integrity. Arjun hesitated. He had never traveled alone, never spoken to a crowd bigger than a school assembly. He wasn't sure if he was ready. But then he remembered the quiet voice in his head from the beginning, the one that said, truth doesn't need an army, just courage. And so, with a deep breath, he said yes. Preparations began immediately. A flight was booked. Papers were signed. And Sundar cleared his schedule entirely to travel with his son. They boarded the plane together, just the two of them. Arjun sat by the window, looking out at the clouds. He wasn't scared, not anymore. He was curious, excited, calm. The summit was held in a grand hall filled with flags from every country. Hundreds of students, educators, journalists, innovators, even world leaders. And somewhere in the audience, in the back row, Sundar sat quietly. Not as the CEO of a tech empire. But as a father. Watching his son step onto a stage that had never been part of the plan. Arjun stood behind the podium. The hall was silent. He took a moment, breathed. Then he spoke. His voice, soft but sure, carried across the room. I'm not here because I built something, he began. I'm here because I survived something. He looked at the crowd. I survived a story that wasn't mine. One written by people who didn't know me, didn't care to ask. I was blamed, mocked, shamed, not for anything I did, but for a aim I was born with. He let that sink in. But this isn't a story about bullies. This is a story about choice. When someone lied about me, I had two choices. I could fight fire with fire, or I could write the truth with peace. He held up a piece of paper. This is the blog I wrote. I didn't have millions of followers. I didn't pay anyone to boost it. I just told my story. He paused, and it was enough. He looked around the room again. You are enough. His voice grew stronger. Every one of you has the power to change a narrative, not by yelling louder, but by standing steadier. The internet will never be a perfect place, but it can still be a human one. The room erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Real applause. Some stood. Some cried. And in the back row, Sundar wiped his eyes quietly. That night, after the summit, Arjun and Sundar walked through the old cobblestone streets of Geneva. Streetlights shimmered in puddles left by an earlier rain. Everything was peaceful. Arjun stopped to look at a small bookstore window. Inside was a display for a new book titled Echoes in a Digital Age, Voices That Changed the Conversation. On the cover, among other young leaders, was a small photo of Arjun. He stared at it for a while. Then said, "Is it strange that it doesn't feel real?" Sundar smiled. "The most real things often feel like dreams at first." Arjun laughed softly. "What if I mess up later? What if I say something wrong? What if I change?" "You will," Sundar said. "You will mess up. You will say the wrong thing and you will change. But if your heart stays kind, you'll never lose your way." When they returned to the hotel, a surprise awaited them in the lobby. Emma standing with her mom, holding a small envelope. Arjun's eyes widened. "What are you, Hao?" Emma smiled. "My mom surprised me. She wanted me to see this. She said, if you're going to lead a club together, you should at least watch his speech in person." Arjun laughed. She handed him the envelope. "Open it later," she said. "When you're alone?" Hours later, under the soft hotel light, Arjun opened it. Inside was a folded drawing. Him at the piano. Emma sitting beside him. Beneath. It were 5 words written in black ink. "You've always been the signal." He smiled, for the first time in weeks. He cried, not from pain, but from grace. But as the world lifted him higher, something darker stirred in the shadows. Because far away, in a quiet home office, Lucas sat alone. He stared at his screen. A new plan. Forming. A final act. Not of revenge. But of desperation. Because when a bully loses his audience, sometimes he becomes his own worst enemy. And sometimes that's when the damage begins. Asterisk, the heart behind the Namath sky over Palo. Alto was still dark when the first email arrived. At 4:12 a.m. The school's automated server received an anonymous message with the subject line, "I'm sorry, but I can't take this anymore." Attached was a single document. No name, no signature. But inside a raw letter, emotional, confused, scared. Desperate. It was Lucas. The message didn't reach the principal until hours later. Just as the first students started arriving at St. Helena Academy. The moment Mr. Thompson read it, his heart sank. He forwarded it to school counselors and ran straight to the administration office. Within minutes, faculty members were combing through class lists, checking attendance sheets and trying to reach Lucas's parents. Lucas hadn't come to school that day. And no one had heard from him since the night before. Arjun arrived just as the air began to hum with whispers again. This time different. Not mocking, not judgmental. This time, it was worry. Fear. He found Emma near the lockers. Her face was pale. "Have you heard?" she asked, voice trembling. "They can't find Lucas. He sent a message. It sounded like ... like a goodbye." Arjun's stomach dropped. His first instinct wasn't anger. It wasn't even guilt. It was grief. No matter what Lucas had done. How cruel. How vicious. Arjun had never wished pain on him. And now, if something had happened, ... double quotes, do they know where he is? Arjun asked. No. But the school called his parents. The police might be involved. For the first time in weeks, Arjun felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Helplessness. Rest of the day passed in a haze. Students sat in classrooms, but no one really listened. Teachers spoke with caution. Counselors made quiet rounds. Whispers filled the halls. Not gossip this time, but concern. And under it all, Arjun couldn't shake the memory of Lucas's face. Not the smirk, not the cruelty. But that one moment, weeks ago, when Lucas looked shaken, cornered, lost, he kept thinking, what did I miss? What did all of us miss? After school, Sundar was already waiting outside. Arjun opened the car door and sat down in silence. Sundar glanced at him. You okay? Arjun didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, he said, what if he's really gone? Sundar exhaled. Slowly, Then we'll do everything we can to help find him. Even after what he did, especially after what he did. Arjun turned to look at his father. You always say that kindness isn't weakness. Because it's not, Sundar replied. But it is hard. It's hardest when people least deserve it. And that's what matters most. Later that evening, the doorbell rang when Sundar answered. He found a police officer at the door, accompanied by a woman with tear-streaked cheeks. Lucas S mother. She held something in her hands, a notebook. Is your son home? She asked. Softly. Yes, Sundar said gently. Please come in. She stepped into the foyer, eyes glassy, voice trembling. We found Lucas. Arjun appeared at the end of the hallway. Unsure whether to approach. Lucas S mom noticed him. She knelt down slowly, still holding the notebook. He was in the park, she said. Sitting on the swings, alone. He'd been there all night. Cold. Shaking. He hadn't eaten. But he's okay. Just broken. Arjun's chest tightened. He had this with him, she continued, offering the notebook forward. He said ... He wrote it for you. Arjun took it slowly. It was leather-bound, old. Insides, scribbled in messy handwriting, were pages and pages. Of thoughts, not attacks, not threats. Just reflections. Questions. Pain. I thought winning meant stepping on people. I thought if everyone hated you, maybe they'd love me again. But I was wrong. You didn't deserve any. Oh, I saw you standing up there, and I realized you're the person I wanted to be. The last line hit Arjun the hardest. I wanted to be seen. Just once. Not as the rich kid. Not as the bully. But as the boy who was drowning. Arjun closed. The notebook gently. Lucas as mother wiped her eyes. He's getting help. Therapy. Counseling. But he asked if you'd visit. Arjun looked up, stunned. He wants to apologize. In person. 2 days later, Arjun walked into a quiet clinic, just outside the city. He sat in the lobby, hands folded, heart heavy.